Despising culture. A recurring slander is that of the lack of culture on the part of the Cathars. The Cathars despised culture, writes Borst, without realizing the incongruence of this assertion with what he himself writes a few lines after, that around 1215 the Italian Cathars sent the most promising of the younger generation to Paris, that the Cathar schools educated the children of nobles in all the learned arts, and further on, that also towards 1300 those who knew how to read were believed to be Cathars among the people. When one historian affirmed that the objections on the Catholic side obliged the heretics and their teachers to a continuous re examination and renovation of their own cultural store, one cannot but know that he is declaring a falsity, because it really was exactly the opposite. It was the Catholics who, having come off the worst for decades in the disputes against the Cathars, had to go back to the drawing board to instruct the secular clergy. That is to say, that it was the objections on the part of the Cathars that obliged the Catholics to a re examination and renovation of their own cultural store. Mancelli writes that the Cathars, for what was the very essence of their conception of life, were inclined to disregard poetry, literature, and art. How can a distinguished scholar, page 254, come to write such a blatant untruth? It's certainly no accident that Catharism was so sizable right in the regions where poetry and European culture was born, the Occitania of the troubadours, the Tuscany of the sweet new style, and perhaps we should add the Sicily of the multilingual Frederick II, given that Dante places him in hell among the Cathars. Then Mancelli adds, and what little there might have been ended up being inexorably destroyed. It's true that practically all that the Cathars had created was destroyed, including the Gospels they had translated into modern languages. But it's not true that it was little. Or better, it will always be little, so long as there is a stubborn insistence on not considering a great part of the poems of the troubadours to be work of the Cathars, nor our poetry of the 13th century. I don't claim that all the new style writers were Cathars, but Guido Cavalcanti certainly was. Apart from the fact that he belonged to a notoriously Cathar family, it's known about him that he went to Toulouse and fell in love there with another young woman. He couldn't announce in advance that he would be going there. In fact, officially, he left for a pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela, but he fell ill and had to stop. Where? Note well, it was at Toulouse, the city symbol of Catharism. From a formal point of view, he was unassailable. He was going to Santiago, but for those who knew and wanted to understand, it's clear that his destination was really Toulouse. Analysing the minutes of the processes of the inquisitors to determine which families adhered to Catharism in the various cities. Also in Florence, of which Raniero Sacconi wrote around 1250, they represented a third of the population. Well then, the Cavalcanti, the Dei Uberti were Cathars, as also were the Nerli, who Dante cites in Canto 15 of Paradise as an example of virtuous people in the past. They write books on Catharism, but they are silent about these other things because our pseudo-culture works in watertight compartments. It becomes silent as if it involved a stain, an embarrassment to conceal, and instead, to have been a Cathar should have been an honourable title. As well as being numerous, powerful, and of every social class, Mancelli also writes, the Cathars have left no trace in Italian culture and society. Nothing, in fact, shows even traces of Catharism in Italian culture. The only poet in, page 255, whom one might want to see an expression of Cathar religiosity, or at least heterodoxy, Ugugioni da Lodi is completely Catholic. Having almost come to the end of this investigation, I believe I have shown that this is not the case.